Hello, welcome to my studio. This is your instructor Linda, and this is video workshop number 4 on wheat ears, double wheat ears, and wrapping. If you have not watched my previous videos, I do recommend that you go back and watch them, as they are easiest to understand if you watch them in the sequence in which I have designed them. So as promised in our last video workshop, I am going to be moving on from the basic quilling instrument, the quilling needle, into the second type of quilling instrument that is often used in quilling, and that is the quilling comb. This workshop, as well as the next 2 workshops, will be focused around the comb, specifically the single comb and the double comb, before moving on to 3D quilling or fringe quilling. So let's start off this workshop by looking at the combs that we use for quilling. Now, if you're not sure which comb system to get, I do have a video on the different comb systems, and hopefully the information there will help you decide which combination of quilling combs you want to get to quill with. So let's take a look at the basic quilling comb, which most of the students in my class have. What you're looking for in a quilling needle is you want a quilling needle that is numbered, as that will help you keep track of your weaving when you're using the quilling needle. Of course, you can get one that is not numbered, but then you would have to keep it in your mind how many loops you have, and you would have to count it when you're not sure how many loops you have. So this particular quilling comb is very high quality. It is made of steel, which is very important. If you've got a high quality quilling comb, your loops will be more consistent and more predictable. The needles won't move as much and give you uneven elements, right? So the difference between this particular comb and this 2-comb system is this comb has 1/2 of the comb with a narrower spacing and 1/2 of the comb with a wider spacing. And this will be useful in controlling the size of the loops in your project and the appearance. Now, because this comb has 2 sizes on it, 1/2 being the narrow comb and 1/2 being the wider comb, the effective working length, or the length that you can actually quill with, is only half of that of this system, where you have 2 different combs with the wide and the narrow spacing. This one also has a different numbering system on the comb itself, which will be very useful for wheat ears. So I am going to quill on both quilling comb types. So my students who are following along on this video, just use the comb system that you have. Okay, so I'm going to start with this one, which is the double-sided. And we're going to talk about a basic quilling term in quilling comb and quilling board called the anchor. And the anchor in your comb or board project refers to the important start of the quilling element project. So the anchor refers to the place on the comb that you start your project, that your project always returns to, and usually ends at. There are very few exceptions to that. So the anchor on the quilling comb will vary with which project that you're doing. So if you are doing a wheat ear, which is what we're doing today, the anchor will start at the end of the comb here. In the 2-comb system, the numbering is slightly different, and the number that you start at for the anchor for the wheat ear is at pin number 1, which happens to be this one here. Now, let's take a brief look at the numbering system between these 2 combs and how they differ, so that when I'm weaving with them, that the numbers don't confuse you. So in this particular comb, the numbering system is the same on the front and the back of the comb, with the 0 being on the center pin in that particular spacing. So we have the 0 on this needle here and the 0 on this needle here. And if you flip the comb over, again, the 0 here and the 0 here. Very useful for doing Copenhagens. In the double comb system, or the system where you're using two different spaces of comb, the numbering on the one side actually starts at the number 1 on the right-hand side here. And this is meant for a right-handed quiller. If you are a left-handed quiller, the comb will start with the number 1 on the left-hand side. This particular one is easier to keep track of the loops in a wheat ear because the sequence starts at 1 and goes up in numerical order. In this one here, when you're doing the wheat ear on this one starts at pin number 15, and on this one at pin number 24. So you have to count downwards when you're doing your wheat ear. So certainly more versatile this comb. You can do a lot more on this one comb. However, it is not quite as easy to keep track of your project and has a longer or shorter working distance, effective working length than these two systems here. Okay, so when we're weaving our quilling element on the quilling comb, we are determining our anchor, and our anchor in this case is going to be the end of the comb. On this comb, it will be the number 15, and on this comb here, it will be the number 1. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to attach the quilling paper to the anchor pin that we're starting our project. And there's actually two ways that you can attach the paper to the anchor pin. The tidiest and neatest way is actually to form the loop using your quilling needle. So in this comb and in this comb, the needle that you want to use to form the loop to start your quilling element is actually this needle here, the standard size needle. This standard size needle is exactly the same diameter as the needles on this particular comb and on this particular comb. So if you are using this comb, it would be a different one. So let's start by making the loop to attach the quilling element onto our anchor or our starting point. Okay, so I'm going to grab a piece of paper here. Let's use a cheery yellow today. Okay, now I'm normally an overhander, but I am going to demonstrate how to make the loop using an underhand technique, as it's easier for us to see what I'm doing in this video. So what we want to do is we want to put our needle onto our paper like we normally would, and you want to turn the needle so that the metal part just disappears. See? So the paper is completely covering my needle. So if you can see the silver in your needle just like that, then you haven't rolled quite far enough. Now you don't want to roll too much further past when your needle disappears, because if you do, what you'll end up doing is you'll end up getting excess bulk in the loop where you're starting your quilling element. So for quilling comb, I do recommend that you use your stylus to apply the glue, unless you happen to have one of these Luer Lock fine gauged tips. I find when you use the standard size tip on this glue bottle, you do get way too much glue on your quilling element in the quilling comb. And in quilling comb, glue control is very, very important, and you will mess up your project if you have too much glue. Not only that, you may have some issues as well with forming or manipulating the quilling element. So I'm going to use the stylus today, and we'll put some glue onto the glue pad here. And when you're using your glue, if you are not using it, always do remember to put the pin back in. Otherwise, the nozzle will clog, and you will have a terrible time trying to declog it and get the glue back out. So, stylus. The amount of glue that you want to take off and apply onto your pin is the same as the amount of glue when you're gluing down your element in the 5-petal flower. So it should be about the size of a pinhead, and apply it kind of close to that area where the paper meets the paper that you're rolling. So once you've got a little bit of glue there, roll your needle just a bit to kind of roll that glue into the needle. One of the biggest mistakes when students make the loop for attaching onto the quilling comb is when they're making this loop, they're too impatient and they don't wait for the glue to completely dry before applying the loop to the quilling comb. Now, if the loop isn't completely dry, when you try to loop your project, it is going to pull out from the anchor and you're going to have to start over again. So it's better to wait the few seconds to have it completely solidify. So normally in the 5-petal flower, you would count to 5 for the glue to solidify or to bind to the paper. When you're doing this one, I would probably count to about 8 or 10 just to be sure that it is completely dry. Okay, so we move it off of the needle and we have this kind of little loop on the end of our paper here. So when you're putting the paper onto the quilling comb, you want to be mindful of which direction that you're putting this loop. So if you look at this loop, it kind of looks like the letter P. And when you're putting it onto the comb, you do want to make sure that you put it in the correct orientation for which you will be wrapping it later. So this loop here, if you can imagine that it is on the needle, the paper goes around like that, right? So when you're putting it on your comb, you want to be mindful that if you've put the loop in this way, that you are turning the paper counterclockwise. Or, if you are putting it on this way, then the direction of your looping is clockwise, right? The reason why is if you pull it in the opposite direction of that loop, you're putting pressure on that glue point there, and you're a lot more likely to get this to break and unravel. So you do want to put it on the comb in the direction in which you will be looping. Now I tend to, when I'm on my comb, I like to loop clockwise. So I put mine on the pin this way. If you're the opposite and you tend to like to loop counterclockwise, then make sure your loop is in the appropriate position for the direction of your looping. That is extremely important and something to pay attention to. Okay, so I'm going to put my loop this way so that it forms the shape of a Q instead of a P. If it's a P, you're looping counterclockwise. If it is a Q, you are looping clockwise. So let's put it onto the needle. Okay, so when I quill, I tend to prefer to quill at the base of the needle. This particular needle is designed with a very flat edge, which will aid you in keeping your element completely flat and aligned. Some people do like to quill at the tip of their needle, which is just fine. But if you're quilling at the tip of your needle, you do have to be more careful about keeping everything perfectly aligned as you quill up the comb. So I tend to prefer to quill at the base. Okay, so now that we've got it attached to the comb, I'm going to put the comb aside for now because I'm going to show you the weaving pattern of a wheat ear. So I'm going to draw in the comb pins in the comb, and here we go. Okay, so here is pin number 1, number 2, number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so forth. Okay, so in the quilling comb, the anchor starts at pin number 1, or the pin that is on the edge of the comb. The quilling element wheat ear is the most basic quilling comb element and can be thought of as the equivalent to the tight coil and the loose coil in needle quilling. Okay, so here we are at the anchor number 1 where your paper starts, and the wheat ear will loop over pin number 2 and return to the anchor at 1. The second loop will start at the 1, go around pin number 3, and go back to the 1. So essentially what you're doing here in the wheat ear is you're going around in circles and building up the size of your element as you go along. Okay, so if you're doing a project where you need to have, say, 5 wheat ears that are the same size, say you're turning it into the petals of a flower, for example, then you need to make a mental note how big the last loop on your wheat ear is so that you can replicate it. Okay, so the wheat ear starts at the anchor, wraps around the pins, going always back to the anchor and ending again at the anchor. So this is the wheat ear element right here. And you can continue it to whatever size that you want. Okay, so if you happen to be quilling the other way, counterclockwise, it's exactly the same, but you're just wrapping around the pins in the other direction. So there is no right or wrong to the direction. Loop in whichever direction feels most natural to you. Okay, so now that we have the pattern out of the way, let's begin our looping. So here we have the element attached to our comb here. And we are going to, because this is pin number 15, we are going to loop one smaller to pin number 14. So when you're using this particular comb, as opposed to this comb here, be mindful that the needles on this comb are a lot longer and they can obstruct your looping. And you do want to make sure you don't want to catch the project on the needles and end up kinking or ripping your project. So my recommendation when you're using the longer tooth comb and it keeps catching, the easiest way is just to get the shorter one. But if you have the longer one, and this is what you need to use, when you're looping around the pin, don't grab the paper too close to the anchor. And see, you don't have much movement here when you are moving the paper. It's too short. So if you have the longer comb, I recommend that you leave a lot more slack on the paper when you're looping around the needles. This will ensure that it will always go around the comb appropriately and not catch on the needles, right? So opposed to keeping like that where you have to yank your paper out like that. See, it's going to stretch right here and you're likely to kink or break your project, which you don't want to do. So lots of slack. You can actually even go quite a bit if you're not sure, right? And then weave the paper through the appropriate combs that you want, and then pull. Okay, so when you pull, you're going to go back to your anchor here at pin number 15 on this one, right? So in the wheat ear, whenever you get to the anchor, you want to glue the paper to the anchor right there. And when you're applying your glue, I do recommend that you apply it kind of right in that crack as close as possible. If you glue it out here, kind of more here, then what will end up happening is your glue will come up the side of the wheat ear quilling element, and you'll end up with the base of the wheat ear being kind of all stuck together and not nice. So you do want to apply the glue nicely in that crack. The easiest way to do it is to use the stylus. If you have one of the fine point glue dispensers with the lure lock, then certainly you can use that if you have sufficient control for it, but in this workshop I'm going to use the stylus. So the stylus, the glue goes inside, right? And then you're going to loop around pin number 2. You see I left lots of slack on my paper, rolling back down. Now there's a couple of ways that you can hold your comb when you're looping, right? I tend to like to hold my comb in this type of grip, using my pinky finger to apply pressure to the anchor. For me, this is the best way to keep the loop still so that it's not moving around when I'm quilling. Some of my students find it very hard to quill this way, and you can kind of discover your own way to loop and hold the comb for quilling. So here we go, we're going around the next pin, so you can see our pin is starting to, our element is starting to form. Now, there was one thing I'd like to mention about gripping the quilling comb, and I notice a lot of students in my class will try and grip their comb like this. Now, while this may seem like a good way to grip the quilling comb, you don't actually want to grip the comb like this because there's a lot of weight on the end of the comb. And when you do that, it's very hard for you to keep the comb steady, and it'll tend to flop around, making it harder to loop. So what you want to do is you want to hold the comb a little bit higher, high enough that you can actually balance that weight on the other side of the comb. I do tend to find that if you are using a comb like this one, because the weight is less on it, it is a little bit easier to balance. Okay, so going back to our element, we have done our third loop here. We are going back to the anchor, and I'm going to apply glue kind of directly from the bottle this time to just to kind of speed things up. Now what I'm going to do in this one is I'm going to deliberately apply too much glue so you guys can see what it's like. If I apply too much glue like that, what happens when you start looping up the element is when you pull your glue, I don't know if you can see it, it's starting to ooze out the side of the quilling element. If you see when you're looping around that the glue is oozing out the side, that's usually a dead giveaway that you are using way too much. And when you use way too much, the first thing that's going to happen is you are going to completely glue your quilling comb. It's going to be covered in glue. Now, this particular comb is made of steel, so it is very easy to remove the glue, but it is a lot easier just to not get it on there, and the likelihood of it getting on your project will also be a lot less if you use the appropriate amount of glue. Okay? Not only that, if you apply too much glue, it does make the paper a little bit more soggy, and you tend to get less of a clean connection on your anchor. So glue control is extremely important when using quilling comb. Okay, so I am going to kind of quickly finish this sheet of paper here, and I'm going to show you the way to connect the quilling paper. Say if you wanted a larger wheat ear and you've ran out of paper. So the easiest way actually to not run out of paper is to use the extra long quilling strips, right? But not everyone has the extra long quilling strips accessible. And even sometimes for me, the extra long quilling strips may not have the color that I need. So then I have to go with the shorter ones and connect them. So when you're connecting the paper on your quilling element, you do want to make sure that you connect the paper in the bottom 1/4 of your quilling element when it is referred to the anchor. So here, if I'm going to connect the paper, I always want to connect the paper between kind of pin number 1 here, or in this comb it would be pin number 15, and the next 2 pins up. And the reason why you want to do that is if you happen to run out of paper and it is at the top of your element and you connect the paper from there, when you're pulling it around, you're going to end up with kinks and excessive bulk and glue marks in the area of the quilling element that you don't want the glue to be on. So when you're finishing or connecting your paper in the projects, you do always want to connect in kind of the bottom 1/4. Now, I do have a student in my class who, when she knows it's a project that she needs multiple papers for, she glues the paper together and then starts looping it. Now, miraculously, most of the time she ends up with the connection piece right down near the anchor. So most of the time it turns out okay. You actually don't want to do that For me, whenever I do that, my connection always ends up at the top, right? So the proper way you're actually supposed to use it, to do it, is not to connect the papers together from the outset, even if you're planning to use multiple sheets of paper, but to connect them as you go along. Now, where the connection ends up, whether it's down here or up here, will depend on the spacing of the comb that you use and whether you're quilling with a tight hand or a loose hand, okay? So if you have a piece of paper here and it doesn't go all the way around the pin, so in this case, it probably would be okay if I connected at the bottom because it reaches far enough. But let's pretend that this paper is shorter. So I'm going to snip that off. And it doesn't actually go all the way around the pin, right, to go back to the anchor. Oops, did I forget to glue that down? Hold on. There we go. So where was I? Okay, so if you don't have enough paper to completely go around the next pin and go back to your anchor, you do need to cut it off and connect the paper from the base. And students tell me, oh, but you're wasting this much paper. Yes, you are. You are cutting it. Of course, you can save it and use it for nestling in other projects, but don't worry too much about wasting this little bit of paper. The benefit that you get from using this and conserving this piece of paper is not worth the kinks that will end up in your project should you do that. So just snip it off, okay? So here we are. We have finished snipping it off, and there is about that much left here, and it kind of connects in the bottom quarter of the project. I generally like to snip it off a little bit closer to the base than what I have here, but just to make it easier to see, I'm going to leave a little bit of a longer tail. So I'm going to add a little bit of glue there and connect a second sheet of paper. So here we go. Second sheet of paper. When you're connecting the paper, you do want to make sure that your paper is aligned perfectly straight to each other. You don't want to connect the paper so that it is offset like that, or you're going to end up again with kinks and misalignment in your wheat ear. So you do want to make sure that your paper is completely flush and aligned so that the two edges are completely matching. Okay, so here we go. We have got it dry. Okay, we're going to loop around number 7 here. Go back to the anchor. Let's add a little bit of glue there. And we're going to go around pin number 6. Okay. And then I'm going to kind of loop it to the end of this paper. And then I'm going to show you some tricks to remove this off of the comb without having it fall apart on you. So here we go. So you'll notice that when I am doing this project and I'm looping around, I am making sure that I'm pulling the paper so that it is flush against the edge of this quilling comb. So you can see that my alignment is very, very straight. And that way when I'm going back to the anchor and gluing, I can also make sure that my paper is straight and not crooked. So as much as quilling is still beautiful, if your elements are not perfect, we do want, as a rule of thumb, to try and keep the element symmetrical. So here we go. So I have quilled on the comb, and it is following this pattern right here. So as a note, I noticed that I stopped at pin number 4 here. So if I wanted to make 5 of these or 4 of these for a project where they need to be the same, then I know that all of my other projects need to stop at this pin number 4 for it to be exactly the same. Okay, so it's kind of humorous because I had a student in my class who made a small complaint to me about how difficult it was for her to make sure that all of her quilling elements are the same size. And I happened to ask her, well, why aren't you keeping track of which number you are and making sure you always go to the same number when you're making your elements? And she looked at me with this completely stunned face and asked me, I didn't know you can do that. Oh, my dear student, I love you very much, but I don't know what to do with you sometimes. The numbers are there for a reason. Use them. They are to help you keep track of your projects. Okay? So here we are. We are at pin number 4. When you're removing this project, a lot of students will just simply grab the project from whatever piece they happen to grab and then try and yank it off of your comb. Now, if you do that, the likelihood of you pulling apart or distorting your element is very high. So you don't actually want to remove it that way, okay? So the best way to remove it is to take your tweezer and to go in between the loops, like so, and work out your elements so that there is a gap in the needle. Now, if you happen to be lucky and you have another quilling comb, because at home I quill with multiple ones, you can put the quilling comb into the needle here and push your project off. That's probably the easiest way. Now, if you don't have that, let's see if I can put this back on the needle to pretend. If you don't have that, then you can remove your project like that and then use the base of your needle to push it off. That way works as well. This way will be the least likely to damage your project, but you have to have 2 combs in order to do that. Okay, so that's another advantage of using the 2 comb system as opposed to the one. So here we have the complete wheat ear. Now, one of the things that we will note with this wheat ear is my center of the wheat ear, or the symmetry in the center, is kind of tilted to the side. And the reason why it's tilted to the side is I know myself. Well, when I'm quilling, when I'm pulling and looping around the needle, I do tend to pull a little bit harder when I'm looping on one side than the other. So I tend to get these kind of flattened sides. I've kind of made my peace with it over the years that my wheat ears will kind of always be slightly lopsided like this, right? Because no matter what I do and how much I practice, I can't seem to get the pulling tension on the left and the right side of the comb completely symmetrical. On the occasion where I'm doing a project where I absolutely must have that kind of center reference straight and in the center, I actually do it on quilling board instead. Because on quilling board, if you set it up properly, you can pull as hard as you want and it will not move. So I noticed that one of my joints here has popped out. And this is actually a good thing because then I can show you how to attach it. So if it pops out, just apply a little bit of glue in that spot that you missed there. Okay. We'll put the element there. Take our tweezer, squeeze it down, and to reconnect that part. So that part where the glue came out, I either didn't apply the glue enough or in the right place, or simply I pulled too hard and yanked it out. So there's the 3 possibilities that it can come loose. But you would rather have too little glue than too much glue. Okay, because if you have too much glue, your project is going to look like it has, like, I don't know, dandruff on it, and it's not going to look very pretty. So there we go. Okay. In my intermediate and advanced class, I do show you alternative ways of gluing and forming this particular quilling element, but that is for another day in another class. So here we go. So even though my elements are always to one side, I guess the bright side is that it is consistently to the one side so that it actually looks fairly pleasing to look at. Okay, so here we go. We have got the wheat ear. So I'm going to put this comb aside and I'm going to do the same project again on this particular comb. And I'm going to do it fairly quickly as I'm going to kind of be doing a review. So let's get a sheet of yellow paper. Okay. And so this time I'm going to show you an alternative way to loop or connect your paper to the quilling comb. So in the last one, we used the quilling needle to make the loop. And it's handy that this particular quilling needle is exactly the same diameter of the comb. But say, for example, you don't know where your needle is, or your needle is the wrong size and you can't get it around the pin, there is another way in which you can make the loop to apply to your project. And that is simply to glue the tip like that. Again, you don't want to use too much glue. Glue control is very important. And having said that, gluing is my nemesis. I always have issues with gluing sometimes. So my least favorite part of quilling. So as you can see there, I applied the glue to the tip and then I simply folded it over. Now this seems to be fairly easy. Why wouldn't you do that all the time? And the reason why you wouldn't do this all the time, and you would probably be better off to use your needle, is when you fold it over, you're going to get, instead of a very small spot where the glue connects, you're going to get a very big spot. And what that could potentially mean is when you're looping up, especially if you're going to be looping up to the next needle beside it, is that this little glue area can leave a little bit of a kink in the start of your project. Now, in a project where you are skipping the center pins, say you wanted to do the wheat ear, but you wanted the first loop to be bigger here, because say you're going to make a quilling element to stuff in that opening there, then this way is good to do because you're going to be looping past that glue connection anyways. Okay, so let's put this on our needle. Okay, so this particular one I glued this way. So if I pull it this way, I'm more likely to get it unraveling. Now, in this particular type of connection, it is less important that you're going the right way because the connection is pretty strong, even if you are accidentally pulling it the wrong way. Whereas if you're doing it with the needle, it will definitely come unloose if you rotate it the wrong way. So just to demonstrate, I'm going to rotate it the wrong way. Going to go around the... So this one here, by habit, I left a lot of slack to loop around. But because the needle is shorter, you can actually leave less slack and it gives you more control over looping. See? So when you're going, you're less likely to catch the needle when you're looping with your paper. So here we go. We've got it to pin number 2, right? And don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bit of kink when I've looped to number 2 because of the glue connection there, right? So I'm going to actually change this one, and let's go directly up to, let's go up to number 4. There we go. So I've looped it directly to number 4. When I get to the anchor, I glue. Now there is a method where you are going to be not gluing as you go around the anchor. And that is used in a different way and for different purposes. We will get to that later in this workshop, but here we go. We've got to pin number 6, and for this one, just for speed, I'm going to end it just at 1 sheet of paper rather than 2, just to speed things up a bit. Now, normally when I'm quilling, I do pay attention to how much tension that I put on this. What happens is if you are what we call a tight hand, meaning you pull the paper really hard, you're not going to get these kind of big fluffy loops that you are in the wheat ear. You're going to get something that is very, very skinny and thin with very, very thin loops. And now if that's what you're trying to achieve, then okay, have at her do it that way, but we do want to try and keep our hands as relaxed as possible so that we get big fluffy loops rather than small skinny loops there. So here we go, we've connected it to the piece. Sometimes too, I won't cut off this piece and I'll just connect it at the end. And this little piece hanging here, I will either roll it or scroll it and make it a little decorative offshoot of the wheat ear. Very, very pretty to do if you're making plants or such with the little tendril at the end of it. Kind of adds a little bit of charm to your wheat ear. But in this one, I'm just going to cut it off. So here's another demonstration here. When I glued this paper, I didn't glue it aligned. Instead of gluing it like this, I glued it slightly like that. So now I did that on purpose. So I'm going to show you how to fix that if you happen to glue it crooked like that. So here it is on the element. On this one, if you pull it off with your fingers, it's probably going to be a lot more successful because the teeth are shorter. But despite that, I still do like to grab my tweezer and to pull it off that way. Okay, so here we go. We have a slight misalignment where the paper is kind of jutting this way. So the easiest way to solve that is just to take your scissor or cutters, whatever tool you happen to have there, and just to snip it off so that it is aligned with the edge of the paper here. So you can see in this one, the center loop, I skipped a couple, so it's got kind of a bit of a gap here. And this is kind of nice, say if you want to put a loose coil in there, it kind of gives it a center, and especially if you're doing it a different color from the color that you did your wheat ear, it actually looks very pretty. Okay, so here we go, we've got the wheat ear. So the difference between doing a wheat ear on this side of the comb versus this side of the comb is in this side of the comb where the spacing is narrower, you're going to get a lot more loops in the same amount of spacing or height in your project than if you use the broader side, right? So if you want kind of denser, more compact loops, then use the smaller end of your comb here. Now, in theory, if we have one comb, say the narrower spacing comb, we can achieve the same effect as the wider comb simply by skipping needles, right? So if all you have is this small one here and you don't have both of these, you can use this one to make the loops by skipping needles. Now, if that's the case, why would we want both of these and not just this one? And it has to do with the size of the actual needles themselves, or the teeth on the comb. If you have this comb and this comb, you'll notice that the diameter of the needle on this comb and this comb are different. The needles are much smaller and more slender on this one than it is on that one. What that means is that when you're looping around this particular one, you will find that the point at the top of your wheat ear will be a lot sharper. It'll be quite pointy. So if you are trying to quill a wheat ear and you need the tips to be kind of fluffier and not quite as flattened, then you do want to use this bigger needle here. Now, for those of you in my advanced class who do wheat ears on quilling board, you will know that in the quilling board you have different size adapters which effectively change the diameter of your needles in order to control the size and the shape of the top fluffs there. Okay, so here we go. We have made a wheat ear using the different needles. Okay, so the wheat ear, just like the loose coil, can be manipulated and shaped from here. Now, in the loose coil, we have the 3 different pinching techniques. Now, the pinching techniques don't really apply to the wheat ear. And the reason why is that the wheat ear does not have a connection where the loops move. All the loops have been glued down and they don't move, right? So you can pinch them However, and in essence, they will always be a control pinch. Now, there are some occasions where I want an element to look a specific way, so I use my quilling comb to make a loop that's a wheat ear without gluing at the tip so that the elements slide. And something like that is very important when you are learning how to make a quilling element called a vortex coil, which I will cover in one of my advanced classes at a later date. So here we are. Here is the wheat ear. You can manipulate it however you like. Most of the wheat ears are kind of a petal shape. However, you can fold them down and make these skinny little petals. And then you can also flatten them to give it a bit more volume. So you can see here, I've manipulated it to change the shape of the quilling element. One of my favorite things to do with the wheat ear, and although the wheat ear is like the loose coil and the tight coil, it's a very basic element, the number of variations and the things that you can use it for are astronomical. Do not underestimate the basic quilling element. A lot of the projects that I do use wheat ears in some form or the other. So one of my favorite things to do is to make lots of tiny little wheat ears like this. And let's take this one and let's flatten it as well, right? You get this kind of flattened element, and when you attach two of them together, you can start building up to make really pretty leaves or to fill projects, a host of different things that you can use it for. Now, if you take the wheat ear and go down along its spine like that, you can pinch the sides and you get kind of this diamond shape. Now this is still a wheat ear, so if you ever see these in people's projects, that's exactly what it is, right? So lots of potential for manipulation. So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to roll the tip, and there we go. Now, isn't that pretty? That's probably something that you could use as a leaf or a plant in your project, or you can use it to fill out different parts of your project. Okay, so here is the single. Ooh, isn't that cute? I can make another side, and okay, I'll stop. I'll stop now. But lots of different uses for the wheat ear. Okay, so you can also do the wheat ear without, like I say, gluing right off the bat. So this particular technique is very useful to conserve time if you happen to be doing a project where the left and the right side don't have to be perfectly pristine. So I'm going to show you a way to quill without applying glue. You can still make the loop for the anchor, but there is a way to do it without gluing at the anchor from the start. You do have to be dexterous though, so if you try this and it frustrates you, just stop and put the loop on the pin and save yourself the trouble. As you get more advanced and you are better able to keep control on your comb, you can attempt the glueless method again. So I'm going to do the same quilling comb. Actually, let's switch to this one. I like this one better. Okay, so we are going to attach it to the anchor by not even applying glue. So what you want to do here is you want to lay the paper underneath pin number 1 or pin number 2 and pin number 2, so the 2 pins on the edge, and you want to hold it down. I kind of hold it down with my pinky, but you can figure out a way to hold it as you like. You're going to take this and you're going to loop it around that pin number 2 here that you've looped. Okay, so from here, change your grip so that you are gripping the top of the element, like so. Okay, so can you see that? So from here, you're changing the grip to here. And if you pull the paper around, you can catch and tuck that little tail that you left there on the comb. So now, see, it attaches. The only problem with doing it this way is you cannot let go of the tension, otherwise it will pop off your comb, right? So until you've looped it a couple of times, like this, you could potentially still lose that part, okay? But now it's nice and tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deliberately use a really tight quilling hand, and I'm going to tug quite hard on the paper. And the reason why I'm doing this is I want you to see the difference between someone who is a loose hander and someone as a tight hander, how it turns out when you're doing the wheat ear on the comb. So you will notice in this particular one that I am not gluing at every pass. So this is what I mean by showing you a glueless method. Well, it's not completely glueless, but it's glueless up until the last part where you attach the last bit of your paper. Okay, so I've gone to the end of my paper here, and I'm going to glue down that loop. Okay, here we go. All right, so now when you are doing it the glueless method, if you try and remove it using your tweezer or this comb and just sliding it off, this center is going to move all over the place because you have not glued at the anchor. Okay, so to remove it, if you're doing it the glueless method, you need to grasp it with the base of your fingers. If you cannot grasp it, you can move it a little bit off of the comb, okay, without coming off completely off the comb, to kind of aid you. So if you're doing it that way, the best way to make sure that you don't push too hard and end up popping it off your comb by accident is to take your fingers and to use them as a stop at the end of the needle, so that if you are moving it out, if you accidentally pull too hard, it's not going to come off, right? So here we go. I'm going to grab the other needle with my fingers as a stop. I'm going to put it in and pull to the edge. Once I pull to the edge, then it's a lot easier to pull my project off of the needle. And you can do the same thing by manipulating it with your tweezer, of course. It's the easiest and most efficient if you have another comb, but if you don't, you can do it the other way. So here we are at the edge of the needle. I'm going to grab the anchor. So it is important when you're pulling off your needle to not grab it anywhere else other than the anchor. The anchor is the firm place that you can use to move the element without having it kind of turning into a minor disaster. Okay, so let's pull it off the project. So this one here, I used a really tight hand and I pulled hard when I quilled. So you can see, if you remembered how this one originally looked like, it was very fluffy. This one is very skinny. Now if this is what you want in your project, then go ahead and pull hard. If this is how your elements always turn out and this is not how you want it to turn out, ease up your quilling hand. Quill less tightly. If you are a tight hander and no matter what you do, you end up with these, the only way you can get big fluffy loops on the wheat ear is to actually use a quilling board. Okay, so here we are. So you can see the elements are starting to slide here because I didn't glue them down. Now if you do accidentally pop it out and then the centers start to move, that is okay. There is a way to fix it. Just grab your tweezer and to move your element back down. Okay, so here we go. It is now back down. So we are going to now glue this element so that it doesn't move. And the best way to do it is to grab one of these quilling clamps here and to put it on the anchor so that it doesn't move. Okay, and then you can take the glue from the bottle and apply the glue on the anchor right there, a blob of glue. So see, a blob of glue on the anchor. Now the disadvantage of doing it this way, although it is a lot faster because you're not gluing every pass, is unless you're using PPA or a type of glue where the glue completely disappears, if you're using just regular glue, you will end up with a glue mark where you've glued it on your anchor. In a project where you're affixing it down onto a substrate and you're not seeing the bottom side anyways, then it doesn't matter. simply when you're gluing it down, glue on the side that you closed the wheat ear, and then you will never know that it's there. So if you're quilling it this way, it is very fast. You don't have to glue every pass. I do recommend using these little quilling clamps to keep them in place while they're drying. And you can go and do another loop till you have a series of them. Okay, so I'm going to move these little bits to the side here. All right, so that is the basic wheat ear. I'm going to do the same wheat ear on this small comb here. Not any different in the technique, it's exactly the same, it's just that this one you're dealing with smaller pins. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick one and then we will go on to the double wheat ear. Okay, so let's show you again how to do it glueless. So between pin number 1 and pin number 2, or the very two edge ones if you're using this comb here. So, okay, so then you hold it down with your fingers, pull up, loop around the pin number 2, change your grip so that you're gripping the top, pull to get that grip. It is a fine balance to be able to do that. And students that are able to do it, good for you. If you can't, don't fret about it. Just do it the other way, which is glue at every pass. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with doing it that way. Just remember when you're gluing at every pass not to use an excessive amount of glue. Okay, so here we are. So that loop, close enough. It's in the bottom 1/4, so I can use it to the end of the paper and I don't have to cut anything off. So there we go. Okay. I'm going to grab the element at the base and slide it off my comb. Take extra time to slide it off your comb. You don't want to go through all that work and then have it explode at the end. So you can see in my wheat ear here, remember how I was saying I always tend to pull harder on one side of the comb than the other? All of my wheat ears turn out like that. And you'd think that after doing it for 30 years that I'd be able to make it symmetrical, but nope, never happened. Okay, so here we go. So put it with the clamp. I'm going to apply the glue here. There we go. I should have used the finer nozzle, this one. When I applied the glue on this one, a whole bunch of glue went on that. And I was lucky it didn't splatter on the rest of my projects. So that one, if you're applying directly from the bottle, is better. Okay, so here we go. Wheat ear is done. So I'm going to start on the double wheat ear. And the double wheat ear operates very similar to the wheat ear, except in the double wheat ear, you are going to be using a different part of your comb. So on the wheat ear, the anchor started at the edge of your comb here, right? So in the double wheat ear, the anchor starts at this number 0 pin right here, right? So number 0. And rather than quilling, looping like that, you're quilling left, right, left, right. So let me see if I can visualize that for you on this. So we're going to have pins here. Okay. Okay, here is our anchor at pin number 0. And here is 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, I got 5 on this side. Okay, so in the double wheat ear, you are starting at the anchor and you are going around the first pin. Again, you can skip pins if you don't want excessive bulk in the middle, but we are going to round pin number 1. Then you go to the other side and you go around pin number 1 on that side. So you loop back around and you go around pin number 2, loop around, you're going pin number 2. So here is the anchor at 0, so it's 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. When you get to more elaborate variations off of double wheat ear, you can start manipulating which pin that you go up to get different effects. But for the basic wheat ear, we're going to make it simple, and we're just going to go up in steps. So it's got kind of a circle like that. Now, when you're looking at this, it probably reminds you a lot of a loose coil. And that's because this one has pretty much the same structure as the loose coil. So in some cases, a lot of the projects that you can do using a loose coil, like the vortex, can also be done on comb as well too. So I prefer to do my vortexes on the vortex comb, which has the really fine needles, as opposed to doing a vortex using a loose coil as a base. Right, but that one I will go over in a different class, kind of a tidbit of insight to future projects that I'm doing. Okay, so in the double wheat ear, the anchor is at the 0. In this comb here, there's the 0 here for the narrower spacing comb, and then there's the 0 here for the wider spacing comb. In this comb system, where you're using 2 different ones, the 0 is actually on the very center of the comb. So you have the full length of the comb to make a super, super large double wheat ear if you want. And same thing on this one. The 0 is here in the dead center of the comb, as opposed to here, which is kind of done the 3/4 of the comb here. Okay, so I'm going to do the wheat ear, and I'm going to do it on this comb here. So let's quickly go over how to make the loop to attach. So I'm going to do it using the needle method. So you put it into your needle, okay, rotate till the needle just disappears. Okay, and then you want to go in with your glue to close it. So here we go. There. So roll it, and let's make sure that it's completely dry before we put it onto the comb. Okay, so here we go. Think it's dry yet? Maybe it's dry. If it falls apart, you know it hasn't dried. Okay, so let's put this at pin number 0. Okay. So I have put it in a Q orientation, right? So this one I'm going to be looping clockwise. Okay, so we're going to go around pin number 1. So you want to go around the first pin in the direction of your looping, right? So if it's counterclockwise, rather than looping on this one as the first pin, you would want to loop on that one as the second pin. Okay, so here we go, and double wheat ear. So in the double wheat ear, if you don't want your loops to move around, again, every time you get to the pin, add a little bit of glue right there. Okay, so in this one, I'm going to use a glueless method, and I'm not going to glue it down. And so, but if you don't want your loops to move, you definitely do want to glue it down. There we go, and we go back to the anchor. Okay, so here's the anchor, and in this one, you've got a little bit of a tail there, so we will glue it right here. Whoa, way too much glue. See, I didn't follow my own advice and use the stylus, so now I've got a excessive amount of glue on the anchor there. Okay, so let's trim that. Okay, so here's your double wheat ear. I'm going to remove it off of the comb. Okay, so here is a double wheat ear. So there we go. Okay, if you let go of it, it will start to move, right? So if you've glued it down at the anchor, it won't move. but sometimes you do want it to move, like if you're forming a vortex or something, like that. See? Isn't that pretty? Okay, so if you are doing a project where, say, you're doing a marquee or a shape that is going to be pinched anyways, sometimes rather than making it formed out of loose coils, I will use the comb to make it, because when I'm using the comb, I can better control the spacings between the different loops there. That's only effective though when you are okay with having large gaps in between each of the loops, because with the quilling comb, the distance between the loops is determined by the distance in your needles in your comb rather than with the needle. Right? With the needle, you can use a really tight hand and you'll end up with really, really close spacing. So most of the time, I only use this when I am okay with having big spaces between each loops. So again, this one you can push it and manipulate it. You can, say, flatten it like that. See this flat thing? And then, say, if you wanted to add another one, and let's grab our first one here. Okay, so you can see how if I'm adding it together, I'm starting to form and thicken the element. So you can put a whole bunch of these together in a project to fill spaces or to make different shapes. Okay, so in the double wheat ear, we are going to do the same thing on the small comb. So here we are at pin number 0, and this one I'm going to do without glue. Okay, here's some paper. Okay, so here we go. We're going between pin number 0 and pin number 1. So the two closest pins, your anchor and the one next to it. Okay, I'm going to fold it down, loop it through, change my grip to hold that. And in this one, rather than looping it back down to pin number 0, we're going to go and loop it to pin number 1 on the other side. And pull as it catches. Then we're going to go to pin number 2 over here, pin number 2 here. And like the single wheat ear, regular wheat ear, you can choose to skip needles in the center if you want less bulk, or you can skip needles according to where you want your loops to be a little bit more sparse. So I'm going to completely loop it. Here we go. Goes down to the anchor, still a little bit extra there, so I'm going to get rid of that. All right, so here we are, double wheat ear. And the same thing with the double wheat ear. If you want the effect of gluing, then at the end you can put your clamp there and put some glue on there to keep it together. Okay, these clamps are extremely useful. I do recommend them. Prevents you from having to hold it forever to let the element dry. Okay, so that's the brief rundown on wheat ears and double wheat ears. So now we're going to go into wrapping. So sometimes when you're doing your quilling element projects, you want a little bit of a border on the edge of your project. And when you have your quilling element already formed versus when you don't have it formed, the wrapping techniques can be a little bit different. So wrapping can be done both to elements that you make on the quilling comb and on elements as well that you make on your quilling needle. So I'm going to show you the first way to do wrapping, and it's probably the easiest if you know what size of a quilling element you want for your project exactly. And that is to use this tool here, which is a ring coil tool. So this particular ring coil tool is number 17. I do have a video on the ring coils to show you how to use them and how to change the heads, so I won't go through that in this particular video. but I'm going to grab a paper and I'm going to make a ring coil. Now, if you don't know what a ring coil is, it was covered in one of my previous videos, so I'm not going to belabor the point. So here we go. So the first way to wrap or create a color border around your quilling elements is to form a ring coil first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's remove it off the, okay. And let's get rid of that little center. There we go. Okay, so this little ring here becomes your border. Let's grab a piece of quilling paper. This one is probably a little too long, so I'm going to trim it and make it a bit shorter. Okay, so let's quill a loose coil. And do you remember how in the loose coils, in order to get it a specific size, I put it into the circle templates? Well, essentially, the circle template is this ring coil here. So when you drop it in there, then you have your loose coil inside a ring coil. And when you pinch it, let's use control pinch. Pinch. Okay, here you are with your element wrapped. Easy. Okay, so now what happens if you have a quilling element that is already formed? Well, obviously, if it's already formed, you can't put it inside a ring coil and manipulate it. So we're going to show you how to wrap it if it is already formed. So I'm going to grab my handy dandy wheat ear here that I made previously, okay? And I'm going to show you how to wrap this particular element. So if you've already made the element and then you decide in the aftermath that, oh, I wish it had a border and I want to wrap it, then you can wrap it this way. So what you want to do is you want to attach the paper to the anchor of your wheat here or the element. In the case where you're doing the loose coil like this, then your anchor is, equivalent of the anchor is right here at the tip of the pear. Okay, actually, let's wrap this pear. Kind of looks pretty. Okay, so we're going to do a double wrap then. So you want a little bit of glue kind of at the anchor point. And, oops, too much. I am not performing well with this glue bottle today. I should probably revert to using the stylus. Okay, where's the cap? There it is. Okay, so we add a little bit of glue there at the base, and you want to apply the paper. So it kind of looks like a little tadpole with a tail on it there. So want to make sure you pinch it down to let it dry to the connection. Okay, then you want to take your thumb and forefinger and you want to pinch it around that sharp point there. Kind of get it nice and tight so that there's no gap there. So now what most people tend to do when they're wrapping is they take it and they kind of wrap it around like that and then go around to the anchor. And while you can do that, this does allow for less control. So this is actually the way I recommend to wrap. Okay. So what you want to do is this connection point where you've made the glue, you want to hang on to it with your thumb and forefinger, just like you do in the controlled pinch when you're doing your 5-petal flower. And you want to wrap it around the element like that. And you can see there's lots of slack there. And then with gentle motions, pull your paper till it is nice and snug up against your element. See? Right? Then you can ensure that it's a nice snug fit, right? Say, for example, if you want to wrap it, but you want to leave a little bit of slack, then you can push the paper back to undo. See? So you can loosen the tension like that. So it's very important that you keep the right amount of grip here. You want a pinch that is hard enough so that your paper doesn't slide around, but you don't want it so hard that you can't pull the paper or that it crushes your element. Okay, so pull it down till it gets a nice snug fit. Okay, so then from here, grab your element and you want to fold over the tip again. So it's got a nice sharp tip. Hopefully you haven't loosened this while you were doing that, right? So roll it around again. Okay, here we are to that same position. Pull, right? Go around, back to the element, pull. Okay, so the number of times that you wrap around the object, see, this is the other way to do it. And if you can do it this way, great, but you do have a chance of crushing your element or getting the wrong tension. So it's better just to grip it between your fingers and to pull at the base to get the nice snug fit and the tension that you want. Okay, so I'm going to do that again. Okay, so there's the loop, pull. Okay, so there we go. And the more times you wrap, the thicker the border. Is that looking pretty? Right. Okay, so now glue. There we go. Okay. So once you've finished it, you can also use a quilling clamp to pinch the base on your behalf so that you don't have to hold it when it's drying. You can just leave it to the side. Okay, so there is one other way of wrapping as well too, and that happens to be wrapping with the papers attached together, or you can also use nestling. Okay, so here we go. Let's go grab another sheet of paper and let's do a yellow in the inside with a wrapping on the red. Okay, right, so let's do it using a wheat ear. We'll use something that we learned today. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to go to the edge. I'm going to use this one. Okay. And oops, I popped that one. Didn't hold it down properly. Okay, here we go. See? That's what happens when you let go of the anchor point if you're doing it glueless. So you do want to make sure you keep a steady grip on it. Okay. So just to save time, I'm not going to glue down this weight ear, so it's going to kind of go all over the place. That's okay. We can use it for a demonstration. Oh, look at that. I happen to finish just at the right spot in the anchor. Okay, so here's another way that you can wrap. That is to attach a piece of paper at the end. Okay, so do you remember how on the wheat ear we kind of went up to the next comb? Well, if we're wrapping, what we want to do here is we want to go to the same comb, the one that you finished. Okay, and then pull it around. And my paper is too short. Okay. So now in the wrapping, it's not as important if you finish at the base. You can finish kind of on the edge. I do tend to prefer to finish on the base. It looks nicer. But in the wrapping, because you are bordering your project anyways, if you don't have it right at the anchor, it's not the end of the world. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So remove our project off the comb. And here we go. You've got a wrapping. By the way, this is what a wheat ear looks like when you don't glue it down. It's essentially the same as what you would get if you did a loose coil, except the distances between the loops are much bigger. And I could foresee you using something like this in a project. It's very, very pretty looking, right? There you go. Okay, and let's pinch this. Oh, isn't that cute? There we go. Okay, so that summarizes my video on wheat ears, double wheat ears, and wrapping. These are techniques that we are going to be using in later workshops and as well in our project-based videos. So thank you very much for joining me in this class, and hopefully we will see you in the next. Thank you. Bye-bye.